Hey, hey, welcome back, ninjas. Today, I want to talk about something that most people never design on purpose: freedom. We may live in a free society, but the truth is, many people unwittingly choose bondage. I remember walking into my parents' house after my dad was diagnosed with end stage cancer and only given months to live. Everything looked the same furniture, the same woodsy smell, the same art on the wall. But suddenly, the house felt enormous and far too remote. The stairs that once seemed easy to manage were now a major risk. The old house and large yard, a massive burden to maintain. The distance to the grocery store and to the ER, way too far. And to be honest, it wasn't him I was worried about. It was my mother. My father wouldn't suffer long, but my mother was going to be left alone to carry a burden she couldn't afford, physically or mentally. That day, I was reminded that we don't just age in our bodies, we age out of our environments. The homes that once held our hopes and dreams quickly start holding us back. Now, our parents and grandparents didn't think about this too much because they didn't have a model for thriving longevity, but we can. We are the first generation living long enough to need not just a retirement plan, but a next act blueprint. We often think that we're going to just find freedom when the mortgage is paid, when the kids are grown, when we retire. But real freedom isn't something you stumble upon. It's designed. Just like a well-built home, a well-lived life needs a floor plan. If I handed you a blueprint and said, design your dream home, I think you'd have a pretty good idea where to start. You'd think about the number of bedrooms and bathrooms. You'd plan the kitchen, maybe your media room. If you were savvy, you might even get into the nitty-gritty of thinking about light and flow. You'd decide whether to create an open kitchen plan, how you'd want the rooms to connect, where the windows should face to capture the morning sunlight, and so forth. But if I asked you to design your dream life for the next 20 years, you'd probably freeze. Most people do. We were taught how to plan careers and save for retirement, but not how to architect the decades that come after. So then what happens? Well, we end up improvising, don't we? We stay in homes that suited a past version of ourselves, routines that no longer inspire us, and neighborhoods that no longer connect us. We settle into routines that once worked but no longer fit. And then one day, we wake up and we realize that we've been living in someone else's blueprint. It was our grandparents who pioneered the traditional retirement. For them, predictability was safe. It was comfortable. After they stopped working, they often only lived another 10 years or so. And they probably already had the right-sized home in a walkable neighborhood because suburban sprawl wasn't a thing yet. So the forever home just made sense. But then came our parents' generation. Thanks to modern medicine, they found themselves living longer, but not necessarily in better health. Lifespan increased, but health span didn't. Bigger homes and suburban sprawl also became a thing. So while our parents insist on aging in place, I think they struggle. I'm sure you've witnessed this firsthand yourself with your own parents or in-laws. Parents who waited too long to move, completely missing out on their go strong years. They delayed moving until they were forced to, only moving as a reaction to a medical or financial crisis. Or worse, they died and they left behind hundreds of thousands of dollars in home equity, never having enjoyed any financial freedom in those final years. Maybe you were even left shouldering the burden of decluttering their home, selling, packing and moving them in those later years. It's rough, isn't it? We do what we can for them out of love, but is that the legacy that we want for ourselves? Can't we learn from their mistakes and make better choices? I mean, freedom, it's not a place you stay. It's being able to adapt and redesign your life. And here we are now where advances in health span are rewriting longevity yet again. We've easily gained another decade of potential vitality over what our parents had. That's an entire third act that no one taught us how to design for. And yet we're still living in structures, both physical and mental, that were built for a shorter lifespan. The result? Functional obsolescence. A home, a budget, even a mindset that no longer matches the era of life that we actually live in. I mean, we wouldn't live in a house with outdated wiring and rusty plumbing and call it good, would we? Of course not. We'd update it. Not because we dislike the old structure, but because we value safety and function and beauty. The same principle applies to our lifestyle. Longevity doesn't come from resisting change, it comes from adaptability. Every decade, your biology needs to shift. If your home and habits look the same at 65 as they did at 45, you're probably not preserving your lifestyle, you're freezing it in time. That is aging you faster than you think. In fact, the biology of this is fascinating. Research shows that our biological age doesn't increase steadily, it accelerates in bursts, especially around age 45 and 60. Those are pivot points where the body reorganizes itself, deciding whether to accelerate aging or recalibrate towards renewal. Now, what determines that direction? Novelty. When you keep learning and adapting to new environments, new social rhythms, new problem solving, you trigger the same molecular pathways as exercise or fasting. That kind of mild intentional stress keeps you young. It's why moving can do wonders for your brain and body. In fact, studies have shown that adults who relocate, especially to more walkable, socially connected environments, they experience measurable drops in biomarkers of stress and inflammation within just 6 months. So the right environment doesn't just feel better, it biochemically supports your longevity. Which means right sizing isn't just about moving to a smaller home and unlocking home equity. It's also about re engineering your lifestyle to support long term health. It's keeping your body and brain in the adaptive zone, where it's not understimulated or overstimulated. It's in that Goldilocks zone that we talked about last week. But before I go any further, I want to bust a few myths that I think really keep people stuck. The first myth is that a paid off mortgage equals freedom. The reality is your home equity is not financial flexibility unless you can access it. A fully paid off house can be the least liquid asset you own. Yes, of course, it reduces your monthly expenses when you don't have a mortgage, but rising property taxes and maintenance fees, they're not exactly freedom, are they? Myth number 2 is this idea that staying put is going to keep you independent. In reality, the data says just the opposite. Homes that were a good fit 20 years ago rarely are a good fit today. When poor home fit leads to isolation and loss of mobility, that strips away autonomy faster than any mortgage ever could. Myth number 3 is that moving equals loss. But that's not true either, is it? Right sizing is a net gain. It's not a loss. It shifts you from maintenance mode to momentum. It's how you stay in charge of your future rather than letting circumstances decide for you. It's being proactive rather than reactive. And freedom, it begins the moment you start redesigning on your own terms. A good architect never eliminates tension from a structure, he distributes it. The same is true for life design. When you balance function, flow, and future, life gets easier. Function is when your environment matches how you want to live today, not how you lived 10 years ago. Flow is when your daily rhythm moves easily between effort and rest, and between solitude and connection. Future proofing, that's where your home and finances are flexible enough to fit your aging body and help you maintain autonomy. When those 3 things align, you get less friction in your life. The energy that you spend on maintenance drops so that the energy that you have for creating and connecting can soar. But let's be honest, most people stay stuck not because they don't want change. It's because it's hard to let go of old identities and old memories. You can't step confidently into your next act without stepping out of your last one. One of my clients lived in the same home for 27 years. She told me she couldn't imagine moving because her late husband had put so much time into renovating the house throughout the years. He'd made it just the way that they had envisioned it when they first bought the home. And she was also afraid that her kids would be disappointed if she sold their childhood home, despite the fact that they'd moved on to building their own lives. And yet here she was managing a space that didn't fit her anymore. It had been perfect for the family for nearly 3 decades, but now it was far too much. Now, fortunately, when we talked about legacy and how honoring her husband didn't mean preserving brick and mortar, but rather preserving the vital life they'd built together, everything shifted for her. She started to think about what would keep growing that vitality. She started connecting to her future self and dreaming about freedom, freedom from upkeep, freedom to walk to a nearby rec center to swim laps whenever she wanted, freedom to meet new people. So, about a year later, she right sized to a sunny condo with a walkable neighborhood that fit her perfectly. It suited her future self. And she texted me shortly thereafter saying, "For the first time in years, I'm not weighed down by reminders of what's gone. I'm looking forward to new possibilities." Isn't that wonderful? That's what intentional design does. It moves you forward from fear to flow, from bondage to freedom. So, I want to do an exercise to unlock your imagination. Because the first step in any design process, whether that's designing a home or a life, is vision casting. Architects don't start with materials, they start with a vision. So let's find yours. If you can, if you're not driving, close your eyes for a moment and picture waking up 5 years from now. Where are you? What kind of space are you living in? When you look out the window, what view do you have? What sounds do you hear? How does your body feel when you move through that space? What does just right feel like? Not too much house, not too much physical work, not too much mental stress, but just enough. Your Goldilocks zone. Now imagine that every decision you make this year, how you invest, where you live, how you spend your energy, is guided by that design, that vision. That's what your freedom floor plan feels like. And it's not a woo-woo kind of feeling. There's actual biology behind it. When you make proactive, value-aligned choices, when you experience autonomy, your brain releases dopamine and nitric oxide, two molecules that increase motivation and blood flow. Those same molecules strengthen your learning circuits and your vascular health, which means freedom actually fuels your physiology. That's why people who make proactive transitions often feel younger. The act of right-sizing home and health reignites reward systems. They're literally rewiring their brain towards vitality. So if there's only one takeaway today, it's this: freedom doesn't happen by accident. It happens by design. Most people are going to wait for someone or something to give them freedom. Maybe they're waiting on their kids or their financial planner or the housing market. But freedom must be designed intentionally, which is why this Friday I'm hosting a live online workshop called Right Size Without Regret, where you can start drafting your personal blueprint. I'll guide you through a home and health longevity audit to help you uncover where your environment and your biology might be out of sync. And you'll walk away with clear next steps for unlocking your equity and your autonomy. Make sure you save your seat at rightsizeretirement.com. I can't wait to see you there. Until next time, my friends, live well, love more, age less.